We now have a two-tier legal system, James, whereby white men will be treated harsher now under British law, James.
Well, yeah, it's really, really shocking, this. Basically now they have put in the system whereby pre-sentencing reports, which basically automatically take into account your race, your gender, your circumstance, all of that to mitigate the sentences that you might get for whatever crime you're alleged to have committed and been brought before the courts and convicted of. That now means essentially that white Britons are going to get the worst treatment when it comes to...
The UK has long been a symbol of freedom and fairness, but rising debates suggest those foundations are under pressure. New sentencing guidelines now weigh race, gender, and personal background, meant to address historic inequalities, but critics warn this could compromise impartial justice. Voices like J.D. Vance also challenge Britain's open border policies, raising concerns about public safety. As these changes unfold, many are questioning whether the nation still stands by the principles that made it strong. If you're following this story, like, share, and subscribe for the latest updates from Britain Media.
This is the two-tier justice system. This is why they call Keir Starmer two-tier Keir. And I'll tell you something, guys, but the other point...
Even Keir Starmer recognises what a catastrophe this is.
Yeah.
Disappointed in this response, and the Lord Chancellor is obviously continuing to engage on this, and we're considering our response. And, you know, all options are on the table, but I am disappointed at this outcome, and now we'll have to consider what we do as a result.
Oh, I don't know, if only there was a Prime Minister who cared about the issue could do something. You're the Prime Minister, Keir. I mean, he's acting like he's just some dude off the street who's a little bit aggrieved.
Yeah.
As the UK's justice system evolves, Labour leader Starmer faces mounting scrutiny over reforms that are sparking fierce debate. The new sentencing framework factors in race, gender, and personal background, aimed at correcting historic inequalities, but critics warn it risks eroding fairness, with some arguing it could favour certain groups while others face harsher consequences for identical offences. Many fear that justice is no longer blind, judged by actions alone, and voices like American Senator J.D. Vance caution this could create a two-tier system where identity shapes outcomes. With public confidence shaken, questions are mounting. Can true equality under the law survive these changes, or is the principle of impartial justice at risk?
It's ridiculous. But James, the reality is what they have literally done is brought in laws whereby if you are any of those identity politics groups, women, gays, of ethnic whatever origin, anything other than a white man must be treated more leniently. So by definition, white men will be treated harsher under the British legal system.
And we'll just be really frank about what we're talking about here. We're talking about, you know, basically people of color, people of different religions getting a lighter sentence and a lighter treatment. And so this means, you know, a lot of migrants who might commit crime, they're going to get a lighter treatment than somebody who is a Briton committing the same crime. That's shocking. Keir Starmer, I don't trust anything he has said there about claiming that he's distressed about that, because, you know, this is the same guy who saw his opinion numbers absolutely plummet and then started talking about, oh, maybe we have to do something about immigration. Really, Keir? Really? Okay, fine. Now you tell us.
Warns that under the guise of hate speech laws, freedom of expression is quietly eroding, with dissenting voices increasingly at risk. While Starmer paints an optimistic picture, Vance argues the reality is far bleaker. These rules can blur the line between harmful speech and personal opinion, leaving people vulnerable to punishment simply for speaking their minds. Critics say Starmer is either ignoring the problem or sidestepping it for political convenience, and as the gap between intent and enforcement grows, public concern over free expression is mounting. For many, the government's silence on this creeping threat is as troubling as the laws themselves.
But the thing, too, the other week, there was that phenomenal speech that J.D. Vance gave at the European Union, where he called out Britain, and he called out Europe, but he called out Britain in particular and said that Britain, which was a bastion of liberty, has no longer become that, and they are straying very far away from that. And the real point is that if America is going to go and defend liberal democracies, and you want to be defended, you've got to act like a liberal democracy. And Britain has strayed so far from the centuries. It took centuries for Britain to develop the traditions of law and liberty that we enjoy as well. And now they're torching them at a rate of knots.
Under the UK's new identity-based sentencing guidelines, concerns are mounting that white Britons could face harsher punishments than others. These rules now weigh factors like race, gender, and background when determining sentences, meaning who you are can influence how you're treated under the law. While the goal is to correct historic injustices, critics warn this approach risks undermining a cornerstone of justice, equality before the law. Justice is meant to be blind, fair, and impartial, yet many feel the focus is shifting from actions to identity. This shift doesn't just create uncertainty, it fuels division and chips away at the very fairness the system is meant to uphold, leaving public confidence in impartial justice increasingly fragile.
This undermines the most basic principle of our justice system, that justice is blind, that everyone's equal under the law, that you're not going to get preferential treatment based on who you are. And we already see it happening even before this formal recognition that it's happening. We have seen it over and over again with people getting ridiculously lenient sentences and then having people in the UK locked up for being in an anti-immigration protest, even if they weren't guilty of anything that was approaching violence, but they were at a violent protest, so they were guilty by association. Same thing doesn't happen with these pro-Palestinian protests.
Under the UK's revamped sentencing system, migrants and minority groups could face lighter punishments than others, as new guidelines factor in race and background when determining sentences. Supporters argue this corrects historic inequalities, but critics warn it risks treating people differently based on identity rather than actions, undermining the principle that justice should be blind. This shift fuels frustration and deepens divisions, threatening social cohesion and public trust. As fairness feels increasingly compromised, growing resentment could ripple across society, leaving many questioning whether true equality under the law can survive these changes.
Most concerningly, I look to our very dear friends, the United Kingdom, where the backslide away from conscience rights has placed the basic liberties of religious Britons in particular in the crosshairs. A little over 2 years ago, the British government charged Adam Smith Connor, a 51-year-old physiotherapist and an Army veteran, with the heinous crime of standing 50 meters from an abortion clinic and silently praying for 3 minutes. Not obstructing anyone, not interacting with anyone, just silently praying on his own. And after British law enforcement spotted him and demanded to know what he was praying for, Adam replied simply, it was on behalf of the unborn son he and his former girlfriend had aborted years before. Now, the officers were not moved. Adam was found guilty of breaking the government's new buffer zones law, which criminalizes silent prayer and other actions that could influence a person's decision within 200 meters of an abortion facility. He was sentenced to pay thousands of pounds in legal costs to the prosecution. Now, I wish I could say that this was a fluke, a one-off crazy example of a badly written law being enacted against a single person. But no, this last October, just a few months ago, the Scottish government began distributing letters to citizens whose houses lay within so-called safe access zones, warning them that even private prayer within their own homes may amount to breaking the law. Naturally, the government urged readers to report any fellow citizen suspected guilty of thought crime. In Britain and across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat.
Starmer's stance on immigration and border control has been marked by flip-flops, shifting between open border support and tighter policies depending on public opinion. This inconsistency has sparked serious doubts about what he truly stands for. Critics like Vance argue that instead of addressing real concerns about jobs, public services, and national security, Starmer is focused on political maneuvering, trying to appease activists while ignoring the broader public. For many, this back-and-forth signals a leader out of touch with the everyday challenges citizens face, leaving voters questioning whether he can provide the clarity and direction the country needs.
Being in an anti-immigration protest, even if they weren't guilty of anything that was approaching violence, but they were at a violent protest, so they were guilty by association. Same thing doesn't happen with these pro-Palestinian protests. That's right. A very different approach. So we have seen it over and over again, and we're not immune from it. It's happening right.
Vance has been outspoken in warning that the UK is straying from its core liberal democratic values, highlighting weak border security as a critical threat to sovereignty and stability. His concerns resonate with many Britons, who are calling for firmer immigration controls and decisive leadership to protect the nation's identity, uphold fairness, and restore public confidence in the country's direction.
There have been infringements on free speech that actually affect not just the British. Of course, what the British do in their own country is up to them, but also affect American technology companies and by extension, American citizens. So that is something that we'll talk about today at lunch.
Well, we've had free speech for a very, very long time in the United Kingdom, and it will last for a very, very long time. Well, no, I mean, certainly we wouldn't want to reach across US citizens, and we don't, and that's absolutely why. But in relation to free speech in the UK, I'm very proud of our history.
Justice in the UK has traditionally been blind, holding everyone equally accountable regardless of race, gender, or background. But identity-based sentencing is shifting that balance, letting personal factors shape punishments. While intended to correct historic wrongs, critics warn it risks introducing new forms of bias. Similar patterns are emerging in the US and Australia, sparking concerns about fairness, free expression, and social cohesion as nations move from individual-focused liberal principles toward group-based identity politics.
Mr. Speaker, we've been preparing for all eventualities ahead of the confirmation of US tariffs later today. Let me be clear with the House. A trade war is in nobody's interests. And the country deserves, and we will take, a calm, pragmatic approach. That's why constructive talks are progressing to agree a wider economic prosperity deal with the US. That's why we're working with all industries and sectors likely to be impacted. Our decisions will always be guided by our national interest, and that's why we have prepared for all eventualities, and we will rule nothing out.
The UK's shift away from its core liberal values has sparked serious concern, with voices like J.D. Vance warning it threatens fairness, justice, and national security. With the US and Australia following similar paths, the implications for liberal democracies worldwide are becoming impossible to ignore. What does this mean for the future of free and open societies? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you found this insightful, like and subscribe for more updates.